Hello, viewers. I'm your host Pratiksha Mishra, and you're watching another episode of South Asia Focus. Let's begin the show. From Dhaka to Colombo, Kathmandu to Thimphu, India's diplomatic outreach across South Asia is gathering fresh momentum. A series of high level meetings, official visits, and development focused engagements in recent weeks underline New Delhi's continued focus on its neighborhood first policy, strengthening ties with its closest partners through dialogue, connectivity, cooperation, and shared development. Here's a report.
India's engagement with its immediate neighborhood is gaining renewed momentum with a series of diplomatic engagements aimed at strengthening strategic, economic and people-to-people ties across the region. In Bangladesh, Prime Minister Tariq Rahman recently met India's High Commissioner to Bangladesh Dinesh Trivedi in Dhaka. The meeting marked the first interaction between the Indian envoy and the Bangladeshi Prime Minister since the formation of the new government. It comes as both sides signal an interest in rebuilding momentum in bilateral ties following a period of strain.
We are very keen and interested in continuing the good relationship between India and Bangladesh, and we are prepared to talk about it, we are prepared to discuss it. From our side, as you know, we have been continuing the supply of electricity as contracted. We have been continuing the supply of diesel also through the Numaligarh refinery and the Friendship pipeline that had been built to supply this to Bangladesh. And India has not hesitated to continue these supplies.
In Nepal, India's ambassador held discussions with senior political leaders reaffirming New Delhi's commitment to close cooperation and its development partnership with Kathmandu. The engagement came as Nepal Prime Minister Balendra Shah held his first one-on-one meeting with a foreign diplomat meeting the Indian envoy. The interaction assumes significance as Kathmandu seeks to navigate its relations with key regional partners while addressing its economic and development priorities.
Especially in Nepal, as you know, the first ambassador he's met has been the ambassador of India, which is a good sign, a good thing. And he's also meeting the ambassador of China today in the afternoon. And so I think that it's good that he has decided to meet the ambassador, because he himself will get a first-hand feedback of whatever the issues are, what are the concerns, and he will be able to convey also from his side what are the issues and the concerns. So it's a very important mechanism, a very important diplomatic mechanism, and it also creates a lot of goodwill, because then the Prime Minister himself is directly aware of the issues and not depending on his foreign minister or his other government members to tell him.
India's outreach has also extended to Bhutan and Sri Lanka, with the recent visits of the Indian Foreign Secretary providing an opportunity to review ongoing bilateral cooperation and identify new areas of partnership. The engagements underline New Delhi's effort to maintain regular high-level dialogue with its neighbors and strengthen cooperation across multiple sectors.
We have a policy of neighborhood first. We want to strengthen our ties with countries in our neighborhood. Foreign Secretary visited Bhutan as also Sri Lanka. We had a detailed readout from these visits, and the idea is that we want to deepen our relationship, our ties with these countries in the various domains that we are engaged in.
From energy and infrastructure to trade, connectivity and development cooperation, India's neighborhood engagement spans a wide range of sectors. At a time when South Asia is witnessing shifting geopolitical and economic dynamics, sustained diplomatic engagement is emerging as a key instrument for strengthening regional partnerships. For New Delhi, the Neighborhood First policy remains a central pillar of its regional diplomacy, focused on dialogue, development and deeper cooperation with countries in its immediate neighborhood.
The electoral exercise in Pakistan-occupied Jammu and Kashmir has done little to resolve the region's ongoing political crisis. Polling has been overshadowed by protest, violence, boycotts and the postponement of voting in several constituencies. With the Joint Awami Action Committee continuing its agitation, concerns are growing over public confidence and the credibility of an election held amid widespread political discontent. Our report.
What was meant to be a democratic exercise in Pakistan-occupied Jammu and Kashmir has instead unfolded against a backdrop of protest, violence and growing public distrust. The elections were conducted in phases with polling held on July 27 and August 2. The final phase was held on August 10 in just 4 constituencies in Bagh and Haveli. But voting could not be conducted in 7 constituencies across Poonch and Sudhnoti after the Election Commission postponed polling indefinitely, citing law and order concerns. The disruption came after deadly clashes and weeks of agitation led by the Joint Awami Action Committee.
जो इलेक्शन का एक सिलसिला है वो बाग वाली साइड पे, रेड़ा वाली साइड पे, हवेली वाली साइड पे वो चल रहा है, उसमें यह है कि मैक्सिमम जो अवाम है उसने उसको मुस्तरद कर दिया है और वो एक्शन जो इलेक्शन की ये कैंपेन है उसको जो आम आवाम है उसने मुस्तरद किया हुआ और उससे बाइकआउट किया हुआ है। कई जगहों पे पोलिंग हो ही नहीं सकी और जहाँ पे कहीं हुई भी है वो 1% या 2% हुई है, वो भी बंदूक के जोर पे हुई है। तो इलेक्शन का बाइकआउट है। और एक और चीज का इलेक्शन कमेटी ने अनाउंस की थी कि इलेक्शन का बाइकआउट हमारी तरफ से किसी जबरदस्ती पे अवाम के साथ ये नहीं कहा जा रहा कि अवाम जो जा रही है उनको डंडे मारने के लिए कभी भी नहीं कहा जा रहा कि आप जाके वोट ना कास्ट करें। यहाँ से कहा गया कि सिर्फ बाइकआउट करना है हमने और पुरअमन रहते हुए हमने इलेक्शन का बाइकआउट करना है।
The election boycott has become another flashpoint in a crisis that has been building for months. The Joint Awami Action Committee has opposed the electoral process over a range of political and governance issues, including the controversial 12 seats reserved in the Assembly for refugees from Jammu and Kashmir. The group has also demanded the release of detained protesters, withdrawal of cases, and implementation of its wider charter of demands. Pakistan's response has increasingly been defined by restrictions and force rather than political reconciliation. Road closures and communication restrictions have accompanied the unrest, while the region has witnessed clashes between protesters and security forces.
See, the political institutions in Pakistan are under a big question mark. The Joint Awami Action Committee is the strongest in Poonch, where these elections have got deferred for 7 of the seats over there. In both Muzaffarabad and the Mirpur elections held, they say that about 53% voted in Muzaffarabad, about 46%. Other than what that earlier years that voted 60%, all these are fudged, absolute fudged elections, because the Pakistanis want to show that everything is all hunky-dory, knowing fully well that from June 5th, ever since they declared this Joint Awami Action Committee a terrorist organization. Can you imagine political activists who are being declared as terrorist organizations? There has been chaos for bad governance, human rights violations.
The violence surrounding the elections has also triggered a wider international spotlight on Pakistan's handling of dissent in the territory it controls. India has now called on the international community to hold Pakistan accountable for what it described as a gross human rights violation in Pakistan-occupied Jammu and Kashmir. At a media briefing, Ministry of External Affairs spokesperson Randeep Jaiswal said public discontent in the region had been met with repression, bullets and blackouts.
We continue to follow developments across the world. At the same time, I would like to highlight that we have seen the kind of human rights violations that were committed in Pakistan-occupied Kashmir and other parts of that country. We call upon the international community to hold Pakistan accountable for its misdeeds, for its abuses, and for flagrant violation or gross violation of human rights.
Jaiswal said more than 90 people had been killed in recent months during the crackdown on protesters, while many more were injured. The figure reflects India's assessment of the violence and comes amid conflicting accounts from the ground, with communication restrictions making independent verification difficult. But the political message from PUJK is becoming harder for Islamabad to ignore. An election held amid protest, an organized boycott, and constituencies where polling could not even take place has done little to restore confidence. And the agitation is far from over. And with public discontent still simmering on the streets, Pakistan's electoral exercise in POJK appears to have exposed rather than resolved the deepening crisis of political legitimacy in the region.
And now it's time for Asia This Week, bringing you top stories shaping the continent. South Korean president urged the defense ministry to relocate a military airbase in Gwangju city by mid-2028 in order to accelerate the construction of a semiconductor manufacturing hub in the area. The remark came after his administration unveiled plans in the June worth more than $576 billion involving Samsung Electronics and SK Hynix expanding their operations to build new chip fabrication facilities in the country's southwest region. Japan's Prime Minister Sanai Takaichi protested Russian President Vladimir Putin's recent visit to Iturup, a Japan-claimed island at the end of the Kuril chain near the island of Hokkaido. According to report, Putin made his first ever visit to the disputed island known as Iturofu in Japanese. Moscow and Tokyo never signed a formal World War II peace treaty, as the main hurdle was the unresolved territorial dispute over the islands, which Japan calls the Northern Territories. Hundreds of brightly colored kites filled the skies above Sri Lanka's capital as Colombo hosted the country's biggest international kite festival. The event at Galle Face Green brought together kite flyers from around the world in a celebration organizers hoped would help promote Sri Lanka as a tourism destination. Families, tourists and kite enthusiasts gathered as colorful kites of all shapes and sizes soared above Colombo's oceanfront promenade. Sri Lanka's economy continues to navigate the delicate balance between bringing inflation under control and supporting a sustained recovery. Following a surprise 100 basis point interest rate hike in May, the central bank says inflation remains broadly on the path it had projected. The bank says future policy decisions will depend on whether inflation begins to move significantly away from that expected trajectory.
Sri Lanka's economic recovery has entered a phase where policymakers are carefully weighing price stability against growth. After years of economic disruption, inflation remains an important challenge, with higher energy costs adding to price pressures. The central bank had anticipated inflation would move towards around 7%, and that expectation played a key role in its decision to tighten monetary policy. In May, the bank raised interest rates by 100 basis points, its first increase in more than 3 years.
If I may explain the basis for the tightening, I think before last cycle we did not change. Before the cycle, there we saw this inflation was going to go in the short term close to 7, no, little above 7%. That was our projection. That has now been realized. That was not unexpected. This was not unexpected. The current inflation. This is the very reason why we tightened 2 cycles ago.
The important question now is whether this rise in inflation remains temporary or develops into a more persistent trend. Sri Lanka's policymakers are expecting price pressures to eventually ease as the country moves through its current transition. That outlook is also shaping how the country approaches monetary policy, with the impact of earlier decisions expected to unfold gradually rather than immediately.
That's why we usually normal increments are 25 basis points, 50 basis points, but knowing that this was going to happen, raised by 100 basis points at that cycle when you saw it. And what we see now, we don't see any undue kind of deviation from the path we saw at that point. If you look at our fan chart, the projection based on indication of where inflation would be, obviously even at that point we predicted inflation would be going to touch the upper bound, and then after that it will taper down and dissipate the impact over the kind of a transition period, horizon of the transition period.
The next few months will be important in determining how inflation works. According to the policymakers, any further change in interest rates will depend on whether inflation starts moving away from the expected path.
any decision going forward for us to tighten or loosen will be based on whether we are going to see realizing a deviated path from what is initially expected. So far we are not seeing that. I think because of the proactive action, and as we all know, when you take a multiple decision, full impact will be felt after some time. There's a transition lag. Maybe 12 to 18 months is a full impact will be felt.
From Sri Lanka, the inflation story is therefore not only about today's prices, but about where prices are headed next. With the economy still on a recovery path, the challenge will be to contain inflation without undermining that recovery. For now, the outlook remains one of cautious optimism, with price stability continuing to be a key test for Sri Lanka's economic recovery.
The Kanwar Yatra 2026 has now concluded, bringing an end to one of the biggest annual pilgrimages across northern India. For days, millions of Kanwariyas walked along highways and pilgrimage routes carrying sacred Ganga water on their shoulders and chanting Bol Bum and Har Har Mahadev. With the holy water now offered to Lord Shiva on Savan Shivratri, the long journey has reached its destination. But the images of faith, endurance and community spirit continue to tell the story of this year's Yatra. Here's a look. The roads that were once filled with waves of saffron, decorated kanwars and the chants of devotees are now gradually returning to their usual rhythm. The Kanwar Yatra 2026 has concluded after millions of Kanwariyas completed their journey from the Ganga Ghats to Shiva temples in their respective hometowns. At Haridwar, over 4 crore devotees had departed carrying holy Ganga water during the pilgrimage. For days, these devotees walked kilometers together, carrying not just the kanwar on their shoulders but a deeply rooted tradition of faith. And on Savan Shivratri, the sacred water was offered to Lord Shiva, marking the culmination of the Yatra. Across the pilgrimage route, the spirit of devotion was equally visible in Ayodhya, where a wave of faith swept the city as Kanwariyas took a holy dip in the Saryu River.
हम तो बस्ती से आए हैं, हम शाम में निकले थे, अब रात में जो है जल भर के हम लोग जो है वापसी जाएंगे। लाखों की संख्या में लोग आए हैं और हम लोग तो 50 लोग आए हैं।
For a Kanwariya, the journey is measured not only in kilometers but also in determination. Walking for days, resting at temporary camps and continuing despite the challenges of the road, devotees followed a tradition that many undertake year after year. Some travelled in groups, others walked with families and friends, but the destination remained the same, offering the sacred Ganga water at Shiva temples. With those final offerings, the long-awaited moment of completion arrived. And before beginning that final leg of their journey, large numbers of Kanwariyas gathered at the Shashwamedh Ghat to collect Ganga water for Jalabhishek, carrying with them the faith and determination to complete the sacred pilgrimage.
हम यहाँ से जल भरकर काशी बनारस के लिए रवाना होंगे। यहाँ का माहौल देखते हुए बहुत उत्साह हो रही है और भारी प्रशंसा हो रही है और बाबा की नगरी में जाने के बाद वहाँ पे उनका वहाँ का माहौल कैसा है क्या है सारा चीज़ देखेंगे।
The massive pilgrimage also brought together thousands of people working behind the scenes. Across the routes, volunteers arranged food, drinking water and resting spaces for the devotees. Medical teams remained available for emergencies, while police and traffic personnel managed crowded routes and helped maintain the movement of both pilgrims and vehicles. For days, these efforts formed an important support system around the Kanwariyas. And as the pilgrims completed their journey, these temporary arrangements too began winding down. But beyond the arrangements and the crowds, every Kanwariya carried a personal prayer and a hope for a better future. For many, the journey was as much about seeking blessings for their dreams as it was about completing the pilgrimage.
बोले हमने ये मनोकामना मांगी थी, हम पढ़ लिख के नेवी में लग जाएं, मर्चेंट नेवी में, पानी के जहाज में, हमारे घर के राजी हों हमसे। बढ़िया हम पढ़े लिखे हैं और बढ़िया हम नाम रोशन करें घर के इनका।
Now, the Kanwars have been placed down, the sacred water has been offered, and the pilgrims are heading back home. The roads may be quieter, but the journey has left behind powerful images of devotion on foot, communities coming together, and millions following a tradition passed down through generations. The Kanwar Yatra 2026 has concluded. The journey is over, but for the devotees, the faith continues. Bol Bam, Har Har Mahadev. From long roads to holy temples, the Kanwar Yatra once again reflected the deep faith and enduring spirit of millions. And with that, we come to the end of this week's episode. See you next week. Till then, goodbye and take care.